The gleaming hull of the interstellar ship Horizon sliced through the inky void, its destination the mysterious world of Nova Prime. Inside the bridge, Ambassador Rick Johnson stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the approaching orb of blue and green. After months of travel, they were finally here. Humanity's first official diplomatic mission to an alien world. Entering Nova Prime's orbit in 5 minutes, Ambassador, announced Captain Sarah Chen from her command chair. Rick nodded, his stomach churning with a mix of excitement and apprehension. At 45, he was one of Earth's most seasoned diplomats, but this mission dwarfed anything he'd done before. The fate of humanity's relationship with an advanced alien civilization rested on his shoulders. "Any last words of wisdom, Ambassador?" asked Dr. Maya Patel, the mission's xenobiologist. Her dark eyes sparkled with barely contained enthusiasm. Rick turned to face his small team. "Remember your training. We're here to build bridges, not burn them. These Novians may look similar to us, but their culture could be wildly different. Stay alert, stay respectful." As the ship began its descent towards the orbital station, Rick's mind raced through the scant information they had on the Novians. Humanoid in appearance, technologically advanced, and willing to engage in diplomacy. Beyond that, they were stepping into the unknown. The docking procedure went smoothly, and soon Rick led his team through the airlock and onto Nova Prime's orbital station. The architecture was sleek and organic, all curved lines and iridescent surfaces that seemed to pulse with an inner light. A delegation of Novians waited to greet them. Rick's breath caught in his throat as he took in their appearance. If not for their slightly larger eyes and the faint, shimmering patterns on their skin, they could have passed for human. "Welcome to Nova Prime, Ambassador Johnson," said the lead Novian in perfect English, her voice melodious. "I am Zara, Chief of Interspecies Relations. We are honored by your presence." Rick bowed slightly. "The honor is ours, Chief Zara. We come in peace and friendship, eager to learn about your people and culture." Zara's lips curved in what Rick hoped was a smile. "Then let us begin with a tour of the station. There is much to discuss." As they walked, Rick noticed how the Novians kept a careful distance from his team. He filed the observation away for later consideration. The tour concluded in a large conference room. As Rick's team settled into their seats, a stern-faced Novian entered, flanked by two others who looked like security. "Ambassador Johnson," Zara said, "allow me to introduce Consul Arya, who will be overseeing our negotiations." Arya fixed Rick with an intense gaze. Despite her severe expression, Rick couldn't help but notice her striking beauty. She looked so human it was uncanny, save for the faint, shimmering patterns on her skin that seemed to shift and dance in the light. "Consul," Rick said, rising to greet her. "It's an honor to—" "Before we proceed," Arya interrupted, her voice sharp, "there are protocols you must understand. Chief among them, there is to be absolutely no physical contact between our species. Is that clear?" Rick blinked, taken aback by her brusque manner. "Of course, Consul, though may I ask why—" "The reasons are not your concern," Arya snapped. "Simply follow the protocol." An awkward silence fell over the room. Rick glanced at his team, seeing his own confusion mirrored in their faces. "Perhaps," Zara interjected smoothly, "we should begin with a brief overview of our respective cultures, to establish common ground." The next few hours passed in a flurry of information exchange. Rick found himself fascinated by Novian society, their emphasis on collective consciousness, their advanced biotechnology, their deep connection to their planet's ecosystem. Yet throughout it all, Arya remained cold and aloof, her responses clipped and often bordering on hostile. As the meeting drew to a close, Rick stood to address the room. "Thank you all for this illuminating discussion. I believe we've laid a strong foundation for future cooperation between our peoples. Consul Arya, despite our rocky start, I hope we can move forward in a spirit of mutual respect and understanding." He extended his hand, a reflexive diplomatic gesture ingrained after decades of negotiations. Several things happened at once. Zara cried out, "No!" Arya's eyes widened in shock, and before Rick could process his mistake, his hand clasped Arya's. A jolt like electricity surged through Rick's body. He saw Arya's eyes roll back in her head as she crumpled to the floor. Chaos erupted in the conference room. Novian security swarmed around Arya's unconscious form. Zara was shouting orders. Rick's team huddled around him protectively as Novian guards advanced, weapons drawn. "What have you done?" Zara's voice cut through the pandemonium. Her earlier friendliness evaporated. "You were expressly forbidden from physical contact," Rick's mind reeled. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. Is she all right?" A groan from the floor drew everyone's attention. Arya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She sat up slowly, aided by her security team, and fixed Rick with a gaze of pure venom. "You fool," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Before Rick could respond, another Novian burst into the room. He conferred briefly with Zara, who turned to Rick with an expression of mingled disgust and disbelief. "Ambassador Johnson?" she said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "Scans confirm that you have impregnated Consul Arya." Rick's jaw dropped. "That's impossible. We only touched hands for a second." "Which was more than enough time for a transfer of nanites," Arya spat, struggling to her feet. "Your human DNA has merged with mine. A new consciousness is already forming." Rick's head spun. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of misunderstanding or mistranslation. "Please," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "There must be some mistake. Let's discuss this calmly and—" "There will be no more discussion," Zara cut him off. "You and your team are confined to your quarters until we decide how to handle this violation. Guards, escort them out." As they were led away, Rick caught a final glimpse of Arya. The hatred in her eyes chilled him to the bone. Whatever bridges he'd hoped to build between their species had just gone up in flames. Back in their quarters, Rick's team exploded into a frenzy of questions and recriminations. "How could you be so careless?" Dr. Patel demanded. "You're supposed to be our top diplomat." "It was an accident," Rick shot back, pacing the room like a caged animal. "A reflex. How was I supposed to know a simple handshake could cause whatever this is?" Captain Chen, ever the voice of reason, stepped between them. "Arguing won't solve anything. We need to figure out our next move. The mission's clearly in jeopardy, and if we're not careful, this could spiral into an interplanetary incident." Rick ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. "You're right. We need more information. Maya, what do you make of this nanite transfer they mentioned?" Dr. Patel frowned, her scientific curiosity overtaking her earlier anger. "It's fascinating, really. Their biology must be radically different from ours to allow for such rapid genetic exchange. But without more data, I can't even begin to understand the mechanics of it." A chime at the door interrupted their discussion. A grim-faced Novian guard entered, flanked by two others with weapons at the ready. "Ambassador Johnson," the guard announced, "your presence is required in the medical bay for examination. The rest of you will remain here under guard." Rick's team protested, but he waved them off. "It's all right. I'll go peacefully. Maybe we can sort this mess out." As he was led through the station's winding corridors, Rick's mind whirled with possible scenarios and diplomatic strategies. But nothing in his years of experience had prepared him for anything like this. The medical bay was a marvel of alien technology. Sleek machines hummed and pulsed with an otherworldly energy. In the center of it all stood Arya, her face a mask of cold fury. "Lie down," she commanded, pointing to an examination table. Rick complied, his heart pounding. "Consul, please, can we talk about this? There has to be a way to—" "Silence," Arya snapped. She turned to a Novian doctor. "Begin the scan. I want to know exactly what his human DNA is doing to my system." As the scan commenced, Rick felt a tingling sensation throughout his body. He watched as holographic displays sprang to life around him, showing swirling patterns of light he couldn't begin to interpret. The doctor's eyes widened as he studied the readouts. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The merger is progressing far more rapidly than anticipated. The new consciousness is already beginning to form neural pathways. Arya's face paled. How is that possible? It's only been a few hours. It seems the human's genetic material is catalyzing the process in unexpected ways, the doctor replied. This hybrid entity, it could be unlike anything we've ever seen. Rick's head swam with the implications. Wait, are you saying that this child, or whatever it is, will be born soon? Arya whirled on him, eyes blazing. This is not a child. It's an abomination, a threat to the purity of our species. Enough, a new voice rang out. Zara strode into the medical bay, her earlier diplomatic demeanor replaced by an aura of command. The High Council has made its decision. Ambassador Johnson, your reckless actions have placed our entire planet at risk. You and your team will be detained indefinitely while we determine how to proceed. Rick sat up, desperation clawing at him. Please be reasonable. This was an accident, not an act of aggression. Surely we can find a peaceful resolution. Zara's expression softened slightly. I understand this was unintentional, Ambassador, but intentions matter little in the face of potential catastrophe. The hybridization process you've initiated is unprecedented. Until we understand its full implications, we cannot risk further contamination. As Novian guards moved to escort him out, Rick locked eyes with Arya. For a moment he thought he saw a flicker of something beyond anger in her gaze. Fear, perhaps, or uncertainty. What will happen to her? Rick asked Zara, nodding towards Arya. That is no longer your concern, Zara replied coldly. Guards, return the ambassador to his quarters. Full lockdown protocols are now in effect. As Rick was led away, his mind raced. He had come to Nova Prime to forge a connection between their species. Instead, he had created one in a way he could never have imagined, and potentially doom both their worlds in the process. The doors to his quarters hissed shut behind him, the ominous sound of multiple locks engaging. His team looked up, hope fading from their eyes as they saw his grim expression. Well, Captain Chen asked, how bad is it? Rick sank into a chair, the weight of the situation crushing down on him. Bad, he said quietly. Very, very bad. As he recounted what had transpired in the medical bay, Rick couldn't shake the image of Arya's face from his mind. Somewhere on this alien station, a new life was forming, a bridge between their species, but one that threatened to become a chasm instead. He had come to Nova Prime to make history. Now he feared he had set both their worlds on a collision course with disaster. Rick stood frozen at the viewport of his quarters, staring out at the alien stars. The diplomatic catastrophe he had unwittingly triggered threatened to escalate into an interplanetary conflict. He had to do something, and fast. A soft chime from his communicator jolted him from his thoughts. An encrypted message flashed on the screen. Medical Bay, 0200. Come alone. Rick's heart raced. Arya wanted to meet? It could be a trap, but it was also the first potential breakthrough they'd had since being confined. What is it? Captain Chen asked, noticing his reaction. Rick hesitated for only a moment. Nothing important, just another warning to stay put. He couldn't risk anyone trying to stop him from this clandestine meeting. When the station's chronometer ticked over to 1:55, Rick put his plan into action. He'd discovered a minor glitch in the door's locking mechanism earlier. Not enough to escape completely, but sufficient to slip out undetected. The corridors were eerily silent as Rick made his way to the medical bay, every shadow seeming to conceal a guard ready to apprehend him. But he reached his destination without incident, slipping inside the dimly lit room. I wasn't sure you'd come. Arya's voice startled him. She stepped out from behind a bank of medical equipment, her expression unreadable. Rick's diplomatic training kicked in, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. I'm here to find a solution, Consul, for both our peoples. Arya's eyes narrowed. And what solution do you propose for this abomination growing inside me? The harshness of her words stung, but Rick pressed on. It's not an abomination. It's a bridge between our species, a chance for understanding we never could have imagined. You don't understand what you've done, Arya hissed, advancing on him. This bridge could destroy everything. Our culture, our very way of life. Rick stood his ground. Or it could be the key to a future of cooperation and shared knowledge. Arya, please, help me understand your fears. Something in his tone seemed to reach her. Arya's shoulders sagged slightly, the mask of anger slipping to reveal a flash of vulnerability. You want to understand? Fine. Follow me. She led him to a secluded corner of the medical bay, activating a holographic display. Rick's eyes widened as he saw a swirling mass of light and color, pulsing with an otherworldly rhythm. This is the developing consciousness inside me, Arya explained, her voice barely above a whisper. It's evolving at an unprecedented rate. Our scientists can barely comprehend what they're seeing. Rick stared at the display, mesmerized. It's beautiful, he breathed. Arya's head snapped towards him, eyes flashing. It's dangerous. This hybrid mind, it has the potential to outstrip both our species, to become something beyond our control. Or to bridge the gap between us, Rick countered. Arya, think of the potential. This could be the greatest diplomatic breakthrough in history. At what cost? Arya demanded. But there was a note of uncertainty in her voice now, a crack in her resolve. Rick took a chance, reaching out to take her hand. This time there was no shock, no transfer of nanites, just the warmth of skin on skin. We can face this together, he said softly. Let me help you. Let me understand your world, your culture. There has to be a way forward that doesn't end in fear and isolation. Arya's fingers tightened around his, her eyes searching his face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. From that night on, Rick and Arya began a dangerous dance of clandestine meetings and forbidden exchanges. Under the guise of medical checkups, they spent hours talking, sharing the intricacies of their respective cultures and the fears that drove them. Rick learned of the Novians' deep connection to their collective consciousness, how the idea of individual thought was both thrilling and terrifying to them. Arya, in turn, came to understand the human drive for exploration and connection. As the days passed, their conversations grew more personal, the barriers between them crumbling. Rick found himself captivated by Arya's quick wit and hidden warmth. Arya discovered a gentleness in Rick that belied his forceful, diplomatic persona. One night, as they pored over data on the developing hybrid consciousness, their hands brushed. The simple touch sent a jolt through both of them, far more potent than any nanite transfer. Their eyes met, and in that moment, everything changed. Their lips came together in a kiss that defied physics and biology. Two alien beings finding a connection that transcended species. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "This is madness," Arya whispered, but she made no move to pull away. Rick cupped her face gently. "Maybe, but it feels right." From that moment, their secret meetings took on a new dimension. Stolen kisses and tender embraces punctuated their discussions of diplomacy and biology. They knew the risks were enormous, but neither could deny the growing bond between them. As Arya's pregnancy progressed, Rick learned to communicate telepathically with the developing consciousness. The experience was unlike anything he'd ever known, a swirling vortex of thoughts and emotions that left him dizzy but exhilarated. "It's incredible," he told Arya one night, his voice filled with wonder. "I can feel its curiosity, its potential. It's not a threat, Arya. It's a gift." Arya's hand rested on her abdomen, her expression conflicted. "Perhaps, but the High Council doesn't see it that way. They're talking about termination." Rick's blood ran cold. "They can't. Arya, we have to do something." But before they could formulate a plan, alarms blared throughout the station. Rick's communication device crackled to life with an urgent message from Earth. "Ambassador Johnson," the stern voice of his superior rang out, "the situation has escalated beyond control. Conservative factions are demanding we sever all ties with the immoral aliens. You are ordered to return to Earth immediately. That's an order, Johnson." Rick's mind reeled. "Leave? Now?" He looked at Arya. saw the fear in her eyes, and knew he couldn't abandon her or their unborn child. "I'm sorry, sir," he replied, his voice steady, "but I can't comply with that order. There's too much at stake here." "Damn it, Johnson! This is bigger than you! If you don't return, it could mean war." Rick's jaw set. "Then I'll find a way to prevent that war from here. Johnson out." He cut the communication, turning to Arya. "We need to go. Now." Arya nodded, her earlier doubts seemingly evaporated in the face of crisis. "I know a place, a sanctuary in the mountains run by a group of scientist monks who might understand what we're trying to do." As alarms continued to blare, Rick and Arya put their hastily formed escape plan into action. With the help of a few sympathetic members of both delegations, they managed to slip away from the station, commandeering a small transport vessel. The journey to the mountain sanctuary was tense, every moment fraught with the possibility of discovery. But as they finally set down in a hidden valley, a sense of peace washed over them. The scientist monks welcomed them cautiously, their curiosity about the hybrid child overriding any misgivings. In the days that followed, Rick and Arya found themselves in a haven of acceptance and scientific wonder. Free from the political pressures of their respective worlds, their relationship deepened. Tender moments were stolen between research sessions and diplomatic strategizing. Rick marveled at the gentle strength he discovered in Arya, while she found herself drawn to his unwavering optimism. One evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the lush alien landscape, Arya turned to Rick with tears in her eyes. "I never thought I could feel this way," she whispered. "About you, about our child. I was so afraid, but now—" Rick pulled her close, his heart swelling. "Now we face it together. Whatever comes next, we'll find a way." As if in response to his words, a sudden pulse of telepathic energy washed over them. The hybrid consciousness, growing stronger by the day, reached out to both its parents. In that moment, as three minds touched across the boundaries of species and biology, Rick and Arya knew they had stumbled upon something miraculous. Their love, improbable as it was, had created a bridge between worlds. But even as they basked in the glow of their newfound family, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Both Earth and Nova Prime were mobilizing, the threat of interstellar war looming ever closer. Rick gazed out at the alien sunset, Arya's hand clasped tightly in his. They had found love and created life against all odds. Now they would have to fight to preserve it, and in doing so, perhaps save both their worlds from destruction. As the first stars began to twinkle in the deepening twilight, Rick made a silent vow. He would find a way to make their leaders understand. The child growing within Arya wasn't a threat, but a promise. A promise of a future where the boundaries between species blurred, where understanding could triumph over fear. It wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty. But as he felt the gentle pulse of the hybrid consciousness brush against his mind, Rick knew it was a battle worth fighting. Together they would forge a new path, not just for themselves, but for two civilizations on the brink of either greatness or annihilation. The next move was theirs, and the fate of worlds hung in the balance. The mountain sanctuary shuddered as the first volley of weapons fire struck its protective shields. Rick's heart raced as he steadied Arya, her swollen belly a stark reminder of what was at stake. "They've found us," Arya whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Rick nodded grimly. It was only a matter of time. But we're not done yet. The scientist monks rushed around them, securing equipment and preparing defensive measures. Through the panoramic windows, Rick saw ships from both Earth and Nova Prime descending on their hidden valley. The sight of his homeworld's vessels twisted his gut. He'd hoped for more time, for a chance to make them understand. "Ambassador Johnson," a gruff voice crackled over the comms. "This is Admiral Hawthorne of the Earth Alliance. You are ordered to surrender immediately and hand over the Novian subject." Before Rick could respond, another transmission cut in. "This is High Counselor Zen of Nova Prime. We demand the return of Consul Arya and the abomination she carries. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." Rick exchanged a look with Arya. The fear in her eyes had hardened into determination. He squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her touch. "This is Ambassador Rick Johnson," he replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I request an immediate ceasefire and the opportunity to address both sides. What's happening here is bigger than any of us. It could change the course of both our civilizations." A tense silence followed. Rick held his breath, acutely aware of Arya's quickened breathing beside him. Finally, Admiral Hawthorne's voice returned. "You have 5 minutes, Johnson. Make them count." Rick exhaled sharply. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He turned to the scientist monks. "Can you set up a broadcast to both fleets? And if possible, relay it back to Earth in Nova Prime?" The lead monk, a serene figure named Corva, nodded. "It will be done, Ambassador, but be warned, the energy required may weaken our shields." "It's a risk we have to take," Rick said firmly. He looked at Arya, who nodded her agreement. As the monks worked feverishly to establish the connection, Rick paced the observatory deck. The words he needed seemed to elude him. How could he possibly convey the profound change he'd experienced? How could he make them understand that the being growing inside Arya wasn't a threat, but a promise? "Rick," Arya's soft voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. She stood by the window, one hand resting on her belly, the other extended toward him. "Come here." He moved to her side, entwining his fingers with hers. As soon as they touched, he felt it, the warm, pulsing energy of their child's consciousness. It radiated love, curiosity, and a deep, abiding peace. "This is what we need to show them," Arya murmured, "not just with words, but with feeling." Rick nodded, an idea forming. "Corva," he called out, "is there any way to boost the telepathic signal from the baby? To let everyone experience what we're feeling?" The monk's eyes widened. "It is possible, but immensely dangerous. The psychic shock could be devastating to unprepared minds." "We have to try," Rick insisted. "It might be our only chance." As Corva and his team made the necessary adjustments, Rick felt the familiar tingle of the broadcast system activating. He took a deep breath, squeezing Arya's hand one last time before stepping in front of the camera. "People of Earth, citizens of Nova Prime," he began, his voice ringing out across the stars. "I stand before you today, not just as a diplomat, but as a man transformed by an extraordinary journey." Rick's words flowed freely now, fueled by the depth of his experiences and the urgency of their situation. "When I first came to Nova Prime, I thought I understood the meaning of alien. I was wrong. What I've discovered here, the beauty, the complexity, the sheer potential of our two species coming together, it's beyond anything we could have imagined." He gestured to Arya, who stepped forward to join him. "This is Consul Arya of Nova Prime. She is brilliant, fierce, and yes, alien to me in many ways. She is also the woman I love and the mother of our child." A collective gasp seemed to ripple through the airwaves. Rick pressed on, his voice growing more impassioned. "I know the fear that drives you, the terror of the unknown, the instinct to protect what's familiar. But I'm telling you now that fear will lead us to destruction. What we've created here isn't an abomination. It's a bridge, a chance for genuine understanding between our peoples." Rick's eyes blazed as he leaned closer to the camera. "You came here ready for war. I'm asking you to open your minds to a different possibility. A future where our differences don't divide us, but propel us to new heights of discovery and cooperation." He turned to Arya, extending his hand. As their fingers intertwined, he felt the baby's consciousness surge, stronger than ever before. "Let us show you," Rick said softly. "Open your minds and feel what we've discovered." With a nod to Corva, Rick braced himself. The monk activated the psychic amplifier, and suddenly the world exploded into light and sensation. Rick gasped as the baby's consciousness expanded, enveloping not just him and Arya, but radiating outward in waves of pure emotion and thought. He caught fleeting glimpses of the minds it touched, the awe of the Earth soldiers, the shock of the Novian warriors, the wonder spreading across two worlds. For a breathtaking moment, they were all connected, human and Novian alike. Rick felt their fears, their hopes, their capacity for love and understanding. Tears streamed down his face as he turned to Arya, seeing his own wonder reflected in her eyes. Then, just as suddenly, Arya doubled over with a cry of pain. "The baby!" she gasped. "It's coming!" The psychic connection faltered as Rick caught Arya, easing her to the ground. The observatory erupted into chaos, monks rushing for medical equipment. The comm channels buzzing with confused chatter. "Stay with me," Rick murmured, cradling Arya's head in his lap. "You can do this. We can do this." Arya's eyes locked onto his, filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "Together," she whispered. As Arya's labor progressed, the psychic energy in the room intensified. Each contraction sent out pulses of raw emotion and sensation, bathing everyone present in waves of shared experience. Rick held Arya's hand tightly, marveling at her strength and the miracle unfolding before them. Hours passed in a blur of sweat, tears, and encouragement. Finally, with one last heroic push, Arya brought their child into the world. The baby's first cry was unlike anything Rick had ever heard, a sound that seemed to resonate on both physical and psychic levels. As the scientist monks cleaned and swaddled the newborn, Rick and Arya leaned together, exhausted but elated. "It's beautiful," Rick breathed, taking in the child's delicate features, a perfect blend of human and Novian characteristics. Arya nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "A new beginning," she whispered. As if in response to its parents' joy, the baby's consciousness unfurled once more. But this time, instead of the raw, uncontrolled burst from before, it was a gentle, inviting warmth. Rick felt minds connecting across the sanctuary, the ships in orbit and beyond, a web of shared emotion and understanding, spanning two worlds. A chime from the communication console broke the spell. Admiral Hawthorne's weathered face appeared on the screen, his expression a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "Ambassador Johnson," he said gruffly, what we just experienced." He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. Another screen flickered to life, showing High Counselor Zen. The Novian leader's usual stern demeanor had softened, her eyes wide with wonder. "Consul Arya," Zen said softly, "is it true? This child, it has abilities beyond either of our species?" Arya nodded, cradling the baby close. "It's more than that, Counselor. Our child is a bridge between our worlds, a living embodiment of what we can achieve together." Rick stepped forward, his arm around Arya's shoulders. "What you've all experienced today is just the beginning. This child represents a new path forward, one of cooperation, understanding, and shared discovery. We're asking you to put aside your fears and embrace this opportunity." A long moment of silence followed. Rick held his breath, acutely aware of the weaponry still trained on the sanctuary. Finally, Admiral Hawthorne cleared his throat. "Stand down all weapons," he ordered. I think we need to talk." High Counselor Zen nodded in agreement. "A ceasefire at the very least, and perhaps a delegation to meet this extraordinary child?" The tension in the room dissipated, replaced by a cautious optimism. As the scientist monks bustled about, making preparations for the arriving diplomats, Rick and Arya shared a look of profound relief and hope. "We did it," Rick murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to Arya's forehead. Arya smiled, gazing down at their sleeping child. "No, my love, we've only just begun." 5 years later, Rick stood on the observation deck of the Harmony Station, Earth's swirling blue sphere filling half the view, Nova Prime's ethereal glow occupying the other. The sight never failed to take his breath away, a constant reminder of how far they'd come. "Deep thoughts, Ambassador?" Arya's melodious voice pulled him from his reverie. She glided to his side, as graceful and captivating as the day they'd met. Rick smiled, taking her hand. "Just appreciating the view and remembering how close we came to losing all this." Arya nodded, her expression turning wistful. "It seems like another lifetime, doesn't it? So much has changed." As if on cue, a high-pitched squeal echoed through the corridor. Moments later, a small figure came barreling onto the deck, a whirlwind of giggles and flailing limbs. "Nova!" Arya called out, her tone stern but tinged with affection. "What have we said about running in the station?" Their daughter skidded to a halt, her iridescent eyes wide with feigned innocence. At 5 years old, Nova was a perfect blend of her parents, Rick's unruly hair, Arya's shimmering skin, and a personality that was uniquely her own. "Sorry, Mama," Nova chirped. "I was just excited. Uncle Zen said the new hybridization project is ready to start." Rick chuckled, scooping Nova into his arms. "Is that so? And I suppose you want to be first in line to meet the new babies?" Nova nodded enthusiastically. "Can I, Daddy? Please." Rick exchanged a look with Arya, who smiled and shrugged. "I don't see why not. It's only fitting that our little bridge builder should welcome the next generation." As they made their way to the station's nursery, Rick marveled at how much had changed in 5 short years. The Harmony Accords, signed in the wake of Nova's birth, had ushered in a new era of cooperation between Earth and Nova Prime. The hybridization project, once a source of fear and controversy, was now the galaxy's most sought-after program. They entered the nursery to find it buzzing with activity. Human and Novian couples mingled freely, their excitement palpable. In one corner, a group of scientist monks calibrated equipment, preparing to guide the newest hybrid minds into existence. High Counselor Zen, now a dear friend and Nova's honorary uncle, beckoned them over. "Ah, the guests of honor have arrived. Nova, little one, are you ready to meet some new friends?" Nova wriggled out of Rick's arms, her face alight with curiosity. As she approached the first incubation pod, her innate telepathic abilities reached out, connecting with the developing consciousness within. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as Nova's eyes widened. Then slowly, a brilliant smile spread across her face. "Oh," she breathed, "they're beautiful." As if in response, a wave of gentle psychic energy pulsed through the room. The assembled parents gasped in wonder, experiencing their children's first thoughts and emotions. Rick pulled Arya close, his throat tight with emotion. This was their legacy, not just Nova, miraculous as she was, but this new era of understanding and cooperation. "We did good, didn't we?" he murmured. Arya leaned into him, her eyes shining. "We did, my love, and we're only just getting started." As they watched Nova flit from pod to pod, greeting each new life with boundless enthusiasm, Rick felt a profound sense of hope for the future. They had faced fear, overcome prejudice, and forged a new path forward. And now, as a new generation of hybrid children prepared to enter the world, that path stretched out before them, bright with possibility. The stars, once cold and distant, now beckoned with the promise of new discoveries and deeper connections. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Rick knew that they would face them together, not just as individuals or even as species, but as a united galactic family. Nova's laughter rang out, joyous and free, a sound that bridged worlds and opened hearts. And in that moment, Rick knew that their love story, improbable, beautiful, and world-changing, would echo through the cosmos for generations to come.